Some of you out there, like me, may be old enough to remember when video games made the transition from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. That mid-1990s era when we got the Saturn, the N64 and the PlayStation. And it was a quantum leap. It was amazing. To those of us who had grown up with the Commodore Amiga, the C64, the Sinclair Spectrum, then a little later on the 16-bit systems like the Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo, the transition was incredible. Somewhat traumatic, I recall. A lot of us who were used to the 16-bit sort of 2-dimensional side-scrolling affair, or top-down games, or even isometric games, were very cynical about 3D. I remember even thinking at the time that it may be a flash in the pan, that it may somehow, for some reason, go back to 16-bit, and that's because we had lived through the evolution of 16-bit games to their apex, and by the end of that era, we were experiencing the very best that 16-bit games had to offer. Then we were moving into the beginning of 3-dimensional games, and as a result we were almost going backwards in a way, because 3D was rudimentary back then. Video game designers were experimenting, they didn't really know what to do with it. So you had this era of high invention once again, where people didn't really know what they were doing. They had this new suite of tools, this new suite of possibilities they could play with. Video games were suddenly much more cinematic, they were much more narrative driven, they had voice acting, they had scripts, they had all sorts of stuff going on, much more potential for cultivating atmosphere, for telling a story, and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. In particular, for those of us who were fans of horror, we of course got the establishment of survival horror as one of the more successful genres of video games. Up until that point, horror in video games was so niche. It was almost unheard of, because particularly here in the UK. Japan was a bit different. There were horror games in Japan, but certainly in Europe and the UK, it was much rarer. They did exist, but mostly on the more adult-oriented systems, things like the Commodore Amiga, that were aimed slightly higher, aimed slightly older, at a more adult audience. Some Mega Drive games had aspects of horror, but that was largely it. They were very rare. They tended to be very controversial. The right-wing media here in the UK always used them as sort of scapegoats for everything under the sun, you know. That's a subject for another video, certainly. But they were rare. Resident Evil came along and changed everything. The original Resident Evil became one of the biggest selling video games of its era. It was legendary, absolutely legendary, and it established horror as one of the principal genres of video games in this new era. After Resident Evil, you had so many... I wouldn't say... I don't want to say copiers, I don't want to say people who were aping Resident Evil, but it is kind of true. You had the likes of Dino Crisis, you had Parasite Eve, you had this, you had games like... that were slightly different, but still horror-oriented, like Shadow Man, which we played on this channel. You had the Soul Reaver series. There was so much. And a little later on, you had Silent Hill. Silent Hill came along and it changed things. Up until that point, horror in video games had this kind of like B-movie comic booky thing. Although Resident Evil was sincerely scary when it first came out. It was scary in the way of a B-movie. It made you jump and then it made you laugh. It was very light, it was very superficial in that regard. It only had sort of one note to it. But it was good. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed it fine, but it wasn't trying to do or say anything deeper than that. It was just a giant love letter to B-movies. That was pretty much what it was. Silent Hill came along, and suddenly the tone changed. The timbre changed, and so did the market. Silent Hill expanded the parameters of what was possible in horror video games. I remember being a teenager and hearing people talk about it like in the school corridors and on the schoolyard, people would be saying stuff like, "Oh my God, have you played Silent Hill? Forget Resident Evil. This is the scariest thing I've ever come across." People were saying, these were teenage boys, so, ego and testosterone driven as you are, you don't really admit to weakness in those circumstances. But I remember, like, kids saying stuff like, "I couldn't finish it. There's a part that I just couldn't do. It's too scary. It's too disturbing." And, people might look at the original Silent Hill now and say, "What?" But it was true. At the time, contextually, there was nothing like it. Suddenly, we had in video games this dark, serious, psychological horror that wasn't played for laughs, that didn't have this gallows irony underneath, that wasn't referencing everything from Nightmare on Elm Street to George A. Romero, that was its own thing, that derived its imagery from and ethos from stuff more akin to Jacob's Ladder or Possession, or the much more serious, deep, resonant horror that had things to say, that had wider metaphorical implications. And that's what Silent Hill really did. It was game-changing. It came along and we were seeing things in video games and feeling things that we'd never seen and felt before. It was epoch-making. And it was fascinating because of that. We couldn't leave it alone. It was like the saw on the roof of your mouth. We just could not leave it alone. It was fascinatingly transgressive and deviant. Silent Hill 2, exactly the same. Silent Hill 3, arguably less so, but still made in that essential spirit. It was so important. It remains so important as a landmark, not only in horror, but in video games as a medium of expression. And it's dead. It's dead. It's done. Those who were hoping for some grand resurrection or revolution of the franchise, in the same way that Resident Evil had, forget it. Forget it. It's done. After today, after Silent Hill Ascension, it's done. Now, it's entirely... In any sane world, Silent Hill would have been done after the absolute debacle and disaster that was Silent Hills. The game that never occurred, that was by all accounts almost finished. The work for that game was near completion. We even had the mesmerically brilliant PT, which is a fantastic piece of work in itself. Guys, if you've never seen PT, go and look it up. It is incredible. It's an amazing work of horror in its own right. But that was only supposed to be a playable trailer, hence PT, for Silent Hills. We were supposed to be getting this big next generation horror game, that a new Silent Hill for the then new generation of consoles that was supposed to be it was supposed to resurrect the franchise after it had been away for quite a long time. And of course, its parent company, Konami, being Konami, completely fucked it up, completely fudged it. And because of legal wranglings between them and the series creator, Hideo Kojima, it never happened. It was nearly finished, this game, by all accounts. It was one of the things that was selling PS4s, because it was going to be a PS4 exclusive. People wanted this game. And PT, if that was an indicator of what Silent Hills was going to be like, it could have potentially been the best horror game ever made. It could have potentially been one of the best pieces of horror media ever made. Because PT, the trailer, is amazing as an experience. It is an amazing piece of work. It's so beautifully put together. It's so disturbing and unpleasant, and it borrows all sorts of influences from David Lynch, from Eraserhead, from all over the shop. It is a wonderful, wonderful piece of work, but it never happened. We were teased. People bought PS4s on the basis of this game's release, and then it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen because Konami is not a video games company anymore. Konami could not make a decent or successful video game anymore to save their lives, to save the company from dissolution. And it certainly has no respect for the franchises that it squats on like some vast toad. You know, it has no respect for the likes of Contra or Castlevania, and certainly not for Silent Hill. All it sees is the potential to make more money off of them, and that's it. And even that it's not very good at. Even that it's such a legendarily incompetent, out of touch company that it can't even do that. It is one of the starkest examples of how capitalism poisons everything it touches, how it is antithetical to the creation of art. That that wasn't the case at the time of Silent Hill's original release. The company still had some gumption behind it. It still had people involved who were passionate and interested and engaged, and the company was willing to let them work. Not anymore. Not anymore. Those of us who were really cautiously looking forward to the much touted resurrection of the Silent Hill franchise. We were supposed to be getting 3 games: Silent Hill Ascension, which was purportedly like a mass release online, like an ARG style thing; Silent Hill 2, the remake of Silent Hill 2, which has been farmed out to Bloober Team, which is contentious; and another game, apparently, another Silent Hill game. If Ascension is anything to go by, it's done. There's just no way it's going to recover. It's only been out for a day, and already the sentiment is so negative, and I can see why. Ascension is the starkest example of how out of touch Konami is with not just its player base, not just the people who enjoy these franchises, but video game culture. It does not and has no interest in being engaged with video game culture, how people play video games, what people want from video games, how they experience them as media. Silent Hill Ascension is a subscription service. It's a mobile phone online subscription service whereby you get bits of a story, like a CG movie almost. It's essentially an interactive movie coming through every day, and you can vote on how the story comes out by voting for different outcomes. Now, I know it's a free service, so they need to make their money back somehow. It has to be monetized. I get that totally. They are a company in the end. But the way this has been released and the way this has been marketed is so ass backwards. It is so contrary to what Silent Hill players and fans want from this franchise and the way they engage with it. Nobody wanted a mobile phone experience. Nobody wanted a subscription service. And worst of all, nobody wanted a service that is so draconian and predatory in its monetization. The way it works is you can get points to vote for whatever outcome you want, or you can just buy them with real money. It is effectively that pay-to-win thing, and you're buying nothing. You're buying air. I feel like I'm living in crazy land. You're not buying anything meaningful. You're buying virtual bullshit, and it's not even worth it. From what we've seen thus far, the product is crap. It is terrible. The movie itself is badly made. The writing is asinine, like Tommy Wiseau asinine, as is the acting and the direction. It's garbage. The pay to win thing. I mean, do Konami not pay attention to anything at all that's going on in the industry that they were foundational in creating? You know, way back in the 16-bit era, if the Konami logo flashed up on a game, you knew it was going to be amazing. You knew it was going to be a quality product. These days, they're so disconnected from what people want. Who in their right mind sitting at Konami was thinking, oh, I know how to resurrect the much-beloved Silent Hill franchise after an almost decade absence, and after the utter fucking failure of Silent Hills, the debacle we made of that. Let's make a phone-based subscription service, because that's how people engage with Silent Hill, isn't it? Fucking Jesus, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with these people? And quite frankly, anyone who goes near the service, they deserve to be fleeced. They deserve to be fleeced. It's done. This is it. If this is an indication of how the company is going about handling this resurrection, forget the Silent Hill 2 remake. Forget whatever nonsense is coming after. They've lost it. It's done. It's over. I think we should just stop now. We should just stop and look at the installments that we loved and look at them for what they were contextually. Because unless Konami give up the Silent Hill franchise, unless they sell it on to someone else, and they're never going to do that, by the way. They are never going to do that. They are going to squat upon its corpse until there is nothing left of it, until it is necrotic jelly and splintered bone. They are going to wring it dry of every last tiny corpulent inch of... Well, there isn't any left. There isn't any vitality left in the thing, are they? I don't know what they're doing at this point. But this is not a misstep. This is a disaster. This is at the end, I think. I don't think Silent Hill is ever going to recover from this, and I don't think Konami's going to recover from this either. The lashback has already been so negative, so powerfully negative. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants this. To announce, to start your big resurrection of one of the key historical franchises in video games. This is what you do? And by the way, they're releasing this into an environment where there are already really sophisticated indie games on mobile. And not only that, but there are ARGs and things. There are web series that are interactive and really interesting and really well made that they obviously haven't paid any attention to at all. This could have been brilliant. This could have been, if they'd have thought about it, they've got millions of dollars in this. They could so easily have hired people who are keyed into this stuff, who know what they're talking about, who know how ARGs operate, and these internet experiences, these new forms of horror storytelling, how people engage with them, and they could have blitzkrieged YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp. They could have made this a genuinely interactive experience that could have been amazing, but no, it's Konami, and they have fucked it 3 ways from Sunday. It is a disaster. It is an absolute, complete and utter train wreck. And for me, I think this is it. I don't think Silent Hill's coming back from this. I have a feeling with the degree and the level of negative backlash this has received, I wouldn't be surprised if they just say fuck it and cancel the entire launch. I would not be surprised if the other games don't come out. I would not be surprised at all. And if they do, well, I'm not going... quite frankly, I'm not sure I'm going to go anywhere near them. They are going to have to work really hard to convince me, because this is terrible. This is the most tone-deaf, the most ill-researched, the most detached and corporate predatory thing I have ever seen from a video game company. And that's going some. That's going some. You are don't pay for this bullshit. You are paying for nonsense. I mean, I would never pay for a subscription service, and I would never pay for microtransactions anyway. You are paying for garbage. There's nothing here. There is nothing to engage with. It is predatory nonsense, and it's filth. I mean, it is utter corporate oligarchical filth, and I loathe it. And that's what they've done to Silent Hill. That's all it is now. While Konami squats on it, that's all it'll ever be. And it's so sad. You know what? Go to the indie section of Steam. Go to the indie section of even the PS4 store, and you'll find a million games that scratch that itch, but which are better. You'll find Visage, which we've played on this channel. You'll find Layers of Fear, which we've also played on this channel, which is fucking brilliant. You'll find Amnesia, you'll find Soma, you'll find so much better. Scorn, all of this stuff. It hurts to say, but forget Silent Hill. It's done. It's over now. Forget it.